Hello, 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 and welcome back. So this video is going to be regarding essentially teaching people how to fish from the bare basics. I've essentially made like a big mistake in making the beginner fishing guide and kind of assuming that you guys know a lot of things that actually there's no way you would have known. I get a lot of messages on Instagram, Telegram, TikTok, everything else, basically saying like, "Hey man," and even my email actually, saying, "Hey man, you inspired me to go fishing. Like, I really wanted to try it, and I went out and tried it, and then I ended up reeling, and my reel reels both ways, man. So I ended up getting this massive knot, and I was like, what do you mean your reel reels both ways? And then I realized I didn't even teach people about the anti-reverse and a few other things which I don't know, like I haven't dealt with it in a long time, so I didn't even think about it. So that's my mistake, guys. That's not you fucking up. That's really me. So for that, I apologize. So my beginner guide wasn't beginner enough. And once you finish this video, I think you'll have a really good basis to look at the beginner guide, kind of really know what you're doing. At that point, when you finish the beginner guide, I think you'll be maybe 90% better than probably somebody who's just next to you at the pier. You'll probably know even more, believe it or not. I kind of bled in some kind of more kind of niche experty type tips into that one as well. And then if you're looking for something super in depth, I have a monthly magazine, The Angler's Compendium. That's when you want to go fucking crazy and you want to really micromanage your fishing and get all that stuff together. And that's on sadtiz.com on the Patreon and whatever, so you can have a look there. But essentially, this is what we're going to talk about now. The music's going to cut out, but it hasn't been an issue before. No one's complained about it, so I'll just keep it going like this and give you as much information as I can. So just to cut to the chase there, the rod is really important. Make sure that when you're tying up your rod and you're basically setting up your setup, that your line is going through your rod in a straight line. A lot of the times when I see kids fishing, they're like casting and it's falling right in front of them. And sometimes it's because their lures are too light, but a lot of the times it's because they've actually kind of threaded their line through their guides in an uneven way. So the line is going backwards through the same guide twice, or it's like up and over the rod and everything else. So that's going to create some really big problems for you, and it's going to cause a lot of frustration, especially when you're starting. And that's the last thing I want for people when they start out fishing, to find it frustrating and kind of quit, because I love it. I really love it as a sport, and I think it's really fantastic for people. Gets them breathing fresh air and experiencing the joy of fishing. But anyways, reel is the next part here. Understand that when you're tying your line onto your reel, some of you guys will be lucky and have bought a pre-spooled reel. When you're tying your line onto your reel for the first time, just do a double, triple knot and put a little bit of duct tape just over the knot and stick that down to your reel. That will do you. That will totally do you, at least just for the start. It does get more kind of intense and much more in depth. At a certain point, you'll be doing special knots to like tie all the stuff together. But trust me, if you're going to fish and just start out, you're not going to experience any problems with just doing it that way. And it's probably the easiest way that you can instantly kind of start reeling that line on and just get down to fishing. The next thing I think I want to explain is the drag cap. A lot of people don't really understand drag, and admittedly, actually for a long time when I started fishing, I never really understood it. I would just be like, okay, cool, I'll tighten this and then my reel will work. The drag cap is this little turny thing at the front of the reel, or on cheaper models, it's like a little knob thing at the back of the wheel, okay? And this essentially dictates how strong your reel will hold on to that line for. So how tightly it'll hold its grip on it. Because the whole purpose of a reel isn't actually just to cast out and reel in. It's actually to kind of have that fight with that fish where the fish can give and take a bit of line. And that means that you don't have to use super heavy line, even if you're catching like a really big fish. So let's say a 10-pound fish could probably exert maybe 30, 40 pounds of force, especially if it's swimming against a current. So just understand that like they can be really strong, but you don't need 40-pound line to catch a 10-pound fish. You could use 10, 15-pound line and just play with it with your drag. So that's something to understand. So I recommend putting it to the tightest possible setting that you can then pull, that you can't pull it with your hand anymore, and then maybe draw it back maybe one turn or half a turn, just that you can barely at the top of your strength knock out a little bit of that line. I think that's a perfect amount, because that means that your line isn't at the point of breaking, and it also means that the fish can take a bit of line, and when it's close to the limit of itself, it can kind of give and take a little bit. So that's the perfect kind of sweet spot that I find. When it comes to essentially your anti-reverse, this is the thing I talked about with reeling backwards and forwards, make sure that's switched off. A lot of kind of higher end reels actually don't even have an anti-reverse on them, like the sea fishing reel specifically. It's like a very niche thing. I think it's used in match angling, but put it to you like this: I've been fishing since for 20 years now. Christ, I'm old. And so like understand that I've never used it apart from when I was a kid and I didn't know what I was doing. I was reeling back and forth and I just made massive bird nests in my line. And my dad at the time had to like undo all these knots, and then eventually he got sick of it, so I had to get good at doing it myself. So just understand that that's something you want switched off. So you only want your reel handle to move in one direction, not in the other one. Speaking of the handle, this moves us to the handle screw, okay? Something I actually see a surprising amount of people kind of make the mistake of. I apologize for laughing if this has ever happened to you, but with the handle screw, essentially, people tend to like not actually tighten their handle on totally, or when it is tightened, they don't basically check that it's tight enough. And so what I want you to do is essentially hold your handle in your hand, and then instead of just reeling it forward in a straight way, kind of like how you saw me doing throughout this video, I want you to try and maybe jiggle it a little bit around. And if there's any amount of play in that handle, as in you feel like you can maybe pull that handle out of the reel or move it around inside of the housing, make sure you tighten the little screw on the other side. This will just ensure that your handle is actually staying there, and like God forbid you catch a nice big fish when you have that on there, you're going to really, really run into a lot of trouble. It's not going to be very nice at all. It's going to be pretty frustrating actually. Um, Another thing that I think it's important is when it comes to knots, um, a lot of people just tie like a typical overhand knot. That's the one everyone just instinctively knows how to do, like since they were kids. It's basically you just go up and over and through and just tie it. And they tie two or three of those and they call it a day. Not really fantastic. I think definitely you're better off using like a blood knot, which is actually really, really easy. You could put your finger on top of the blood knot into the loop there and just wrap it up around your finger and then back through that hole. It's actually really, really easy. I feel like I've taught people, kids, all this kind of stuff to do it really, really fast. And then if you feel comfortable with that, then you can do a Palomar knot as well. That's one of the knots I recommend in my beginner fishing guide. Those are essentially the two knots that you will need, especially when you start out. I wouldn't worry too much about anything else unless you really want to kind of step up your game a little bit. I talked about this once before, spoke about it, wrote about it in the Angler's Compendium, made a video about it, and I'm re-emphasizing it here. I highly recommend the use of superglue especially when you're starting off, but all throughout. I still use superglue on basically all my knots. With just touching a tiny bit of it on the actual knot structure itself, it'll just mean that the knot is much, much less likely to actually slip. So that way, when you're actually out there and you're casting and everything else, you can have like a good bit of faith that the knot is not only going to hold there because of the actual structure and composure of the knot, because it's an actual fishing knot, aka a Palomar or a blood knot, but also that glue, super glue, will stay on there and it'll just add that extra layer of protection on it, and also it'll make it that little bit harder. It'll actually make it a little bit more abrasion resistant. So highly, highly recommend that. I cannot recommend that enough. Whether you're beginner or you're kind of fishing for a while, always put super glue on your knots. I never see a reason not to. Moving on from that, I think it's important as well not to get bogged down with too many lures and everything else. That is, if you're lure fishing, just understand jig-headed soft plastics, so they have a metal thing on the top, and they're soft plastics, whether that be weedless or not weedless. Highly recommend. You really, really won't go wrong with them. You can fish them high, you can fish them low. A lot of them aren't too heavy, so they have a pretty decent sink rate. So if you're just reeling it at a normal pace, normal, consistent, steady pace, you'll be able to keep that kind of in the upper mid-water a lot of the time. So it's unlikely that you'll kind of hit the bottom and snag it or cause it to swim any kind of way that you don't really want it to. They kind of swim very, very straight and very, very true. So highly recommend you get one of them. Now, this is the bit that like might kind of catch people off guard. I'm going to talk about two subjects that are a little bit more confusing, and I think this once you have this down, then you have everything down. Let's talk about the slightly easier one first. So casting. Highly recommend you look at the beginner fishing guide when I talk about casting. But in that video, I also I simplify it, but also I just want to emphasize the power of the overhead cast. Right? It looks a little bit silly, especially when you're starting out. There is kind of ways you can kind of make it look more cool when people are watching or whatever, if you care about that. But essentially what I want you to do is when you're casting is put the rod essentially directly over your head and just have that lure or the the weight or the bait basically behind you, whatever you have attached to the terminal end of your line, and flick it directly over your head, or as close to much as over your head or just over your shoulder as you can. This is the easiest way to kind of understand how the casting works, and make sure you always kind of let that line go at the 10, 11 o'clock position, if you look at it as on a clock face. That'll probably get you the most height and the most distance, and it'll kind of let your cast achieve exactly what you're looking for. Again, I explained this visually, I think, decently well in my beginner fishing video, but just understand that it doesn't have to be over your shoulder. It can literally be directly over your head, as in right down the middle, bang, up and over. And when I am personally, even at this stage with X amount of years of fishing, looking to cast somewhere really, really, really precise, I a lot of the times actually do an overhead cast in this exact same way, because it's very, very easy to control it, and you can also get a good bit of distance out of it once you understand it. So remember, just learn the technique. With the technique will come the power, and then over time you can kind of start working on that, and then eventually you can kind of get that out to those distances that you actually want to be casting to. Sort of like how a golf swing, but I don't play golf. I really, really hated it when I tried it. So the last thing that's really, really confusing, I think gets a lot of people, and I understand why, because it is a bit of a confusing topic, is leaders. Hello, sorry, this is me in the editing phase. I just realized that I mentioned it later on, but not everybody always stays till the very end. So I just thought I'd get this across super fast. You do not need to tie a leader if you are already using something like monofilament line as your main line. You only really need a leader if you are using braid all throughout and are casting braid and need something at the end of that braid to make that work. If you're just casting with mono, like a lot of people probably are at the start, because it's the cheapest, and in my opinion, one of the best lines you can get, especially for leader material, you don't need to tie on a leader. You don't need to worry about any of this stuff. So just thought I'd get that out of the way. I do address it again later on, but just wanted to be clear. If you've ever read any of my stuff from the Angler's Compendium, you'll understand that I think leaders are really, really, really important. But also understand that the bar to entry to leaders can be a little bit confusing, because everyone kind of wants to try do an FG knot straight away, which is what a lot of other fishing channels essentially talk about all the time. I have a tutorial where I kind of taught you guys how to tie that in my beginner fishing series. I tied it actually down by the beach in heavy winds, just to kind of show you that it can be done really, really, really simply. But there's these guys on here that are called Salt Strong. They have like an old video which is basically how to tie an FG knot. Highly, highly recommend. That's kind of who I learned it from, and then you can kind of build it up from there. Again, go back to the super glue example. If you put a little bit of super glue on it, just a tiny bit though, you will definitely hold that line a little bit more strongly onto your line, on your line to line connection, a little bit of word salad, and also it'll make it more abrasion resistant, so when it's casting through your guides time and time again, it'll reduce the amount of times that you need until that line essentially wears itself out, because FG knots do eventually wear themselves out and won't just be able to stay there forever. Worst case scenario though, you can't tie an FG knot, you have an issue with that, it looks a little bit too confusing, you're just not arsed. Believe it or not, I actually think it's okay and it's not too bad to use a swivel, which is this thing right here. So it's essentially like a double-ended barrel on this way. And really, really simple. You use one of the knots that we talked about earlier. So you use a Palomar, or you use a blood knot, a little bit of super glue as well on the tip of it or in the end of it. And that'll essentially connect your one line there. So that's your braid or your other line to the leader at the end of it. So that I think is the best possible way I can explain it. Leaders as well, by the way, are just basically meant that you have a little bit of abrasion resistance at the end of your line. If you are fishing all the way through with monofilament, as in you're not using braid or anything fancy like that, I actually don't see a reason to attach an extra leader of something else on top of it. If anything, you're just making a bigger failure point at the end of your reel. I use for all my leaders 15-pound monofilament Daiwa sensor. I always use monofilament. I prefer to fluorocarbon. I think fluorocarbon's a bit of a scam, bit of a fishing gimmick. It's just 1.5 to 2 times more expensive than mono for literally no reason other than marketing. And yeah, anyways, I have a big gripe with those people. But just remember, it's completely fine to completely spool up your reel with just full monofilament. This 15-pound Daiwa one, you can get it online. It's actually not too expensive at all. And if you fully line up your line with that, you won't need a leader. You can kind of just tie the stuff onto it, or use a lure clip like I use a lot of the time when I am lure fishing. I think this has been kind of comprehensive enough where you'll definitely know what you're doing from start to finish, but also kind of beginner friendly enough where I've kind of touched on a few topics, even if just glance at them very, very gently, that you can kind of have an understanding and be able to kind of build that confidence and build an understanding when you're looking at the rest of the fishing stuff that I have, either here or if you read the Angler's Compendium or if you just go and watch somebody else. You'll be able to pick up little bits and pieces from people all over the world. Just understand some of the tips that some people give are very region dependent and very region specific. That's something that took me a lot of time to figure out. Here on this channel, I try kind of focus it to be kind of more broad, unless when I'm talking something very, very specific and pointed, in which case I'll always tell you. So this hasn't been particularly short, but it's been kind of as comprehensive, as short, and as brief as I could make it. Thank you all very much for tuning back in. Wish you all the best. Expect more in-depth stuff to be coming very, very soon. Literally just getting back on the horse, as they say. Love you all. Talk soon. Bye-bye. God bless.